Moving forward, many scholars have pointed out that American democracy wouldn't have been possible without the popularization of the printing press. In fact, it's so important to the idea of American democracy that it was entrenched as a fundamental right and freedom in the American Bill of Rights. The discovery of electricity and the subsequent invention of various electronic media have likewise affected very important changes on society. For example, according to communications scholar James Carey, the telegraph facilitated the growth of monopoly capitalism and imperialism. That's the electric goods industry and its centralized control across space. It inspired popular imagery combining peace and harmony with power and profit. It marked a watershed in communication by separating communication from transportation and becoming the basis of the transmission model of communication. It influenced journalism and the concept of objectivity and language. There became a telegraphic style of communication. It also changed the meaning of space. We could then define national commodities markets rather than just local ones, and we could have geographically dispersed organizations. The telegraph also changed the meaning of time as standardized time zones became required and implemented, and time itself became a new frontier. Subsequent electronic media inventions have gone on to drastically alter what we think of as our normal everyday world, perhaps most noticeably the telephone, radio, and television, but also many less famous devices such as electric relay switches and Geiger counters. Mass media technologies brought with them many changes in the way our civilization produces, distributes, consumes, and thinks about information. Of all the inventions throughout our relatively short history of electronic media development, none have had the monumental impact on our present moment like networked digital computers. Globally networked digital communication has created conditions in which our main focus, memes, as a new media phenomenon has erupted and which is already so widespread and commonplace that it's become a normal part of our media experiences. These eruptions of memes come as a result of media content going viral. Going viral is a term that's used to describe a sudden and exponential eruption of media content consumption through the combined agency of thousands and sometimes even millions of users who promote a media message through their social networks. So now that we have a good understanding of the media environment and the phenomenon of memes, let's look at some possible explanations. To do this, we need to go run through a few theories and explain how people actually use media and how people use memes in particular. The two-step flow theory of communication was elaborated by Lazarsfeld and Katz. Information acquired through media in this model goes first through individuals who are known as opinion leaders who pay close attention to the mass media and the messages, and then they pass on their own interpretations in addition to the actual media content. So this emphasizes a social process that takes place in the interpretive phase of communication. This is between people who actually know each other in the traditional sense. What does this mean when we hold memes up to this model? In the broadcast model that this theory was designed for, the transmission of information was seen as a one-way process. However, when something goes viral, every person who decides to repost is a mass media mogul. There's no endpoint in the traditional sense. Rather, the network will mass reproduce the meme and its mutations until it no longer has value to the individuals. So with memes, media effects are potentially strong, fast, indirect. People's opinions and behaviors are mass broadcast as everyone behaves like opinion leaders. Distribution is nonlinear and exponential, and so the media effects have unknown potential. Another popular model of communication is the discursive model elaborated by Stuart Hall in 1973. In this model of communication, the ideas presented are in a two-step flow like the previous model, but introduces an analysis of various ways in which an audience member might interpret a message. They may understand the message and accept it, which would be a dominant reading. They may understand the message and reject it, which would be an oppositional reading, or they can understand the message and negotiate some idea of truth that stands in between the dominant and the oppositional reading. When we apply this model to memes, we find that the encoding and decoding schematic gives way to an encoding and recoding schematic. The origin of the information source doesn't matter. Its usefulness as a recodable, free-floating signifier is what matters to the decoder. In other words, the decoder wants to be able to recode it for their own purposes. So like Latour's immutable mobile, it becomes inflected by everyone that retouches it along the way. Harold Innis and Marshall McLuhan are the two figures. Harold Innis and Marshall McLuhan are two names most closely associated with the foundation of medium theory. This theory looks at the influence of media on society and civilization, saying that the medium itself is even more important than the informational content, because it introduces changes in the way society is organized and the way we go about our everyday lives. It also impacts how we see the world. Hence, Marshall McLuhan said, quote, "The medium is the message," end quote. According to Harold Innis, civilizational change can be seen as a correlation that happens as a battle between competing media. And the rise of a new medium brings with it a change in political order as the knowledge system and the political. When we apply medium theory to the phenomenon of memes, it entails looking at the characteristics of our global network, which is the medium through which this content travels. It facilitates instantaneous or almost instantaneous distribution, ubiquity in the sense that we are able to acquire and distribute these content around the world from almost anywhere. It's almost telepresent, that is, it is present in the moment that we're in, but also archives things and projects things into the future. It's highly accessible. There's hardly anywhere in the Western world we would go where we couldn't participate in this. And there is no distinction between the physical and virtual reality anymore. This is the comment on how we actually use our phones while we're carrying out our physical activities, and so we virtualize the space we're in. In terms of the civilizational change, we have something called a text-based orality. Due to the quick and conversational real-time ability to put our conversations into text, we actually have an oxymoron in the traditional sense. That is, we no longer need to choose either being oral or textual. We can be both at the same time. Truth is revealed in irony and not facts. And another popular model that we can use to understand memes is James Carey's ritual model. Building on Harold Innis's work, the ritual model accounts for the importance of continuity in social processes in the way we use media, and the agency of people in acting out what is consumed as media into everyday physical world rituals. The main goal of communication in this model is to create a shared sense of community and maintain culture through the ritualization of our activities. In applying the ritual model to memes, we can see that people participate in many communities at once, passing content between them, but also editing content for each specific representation of oneself. People also no longer think of themselves as belonging to only one community. Rather, many people belong to many communities simultaneously. If we look at the phenomenon of memes through the lens of consumer cultural theory, or critique of consumer culture, in a consumer culture like ours, people approach consumption as a process of producing an aesthetic representation of how they believe they should be seen, a spectacle, in the words of Guy Debord, rather than acting out deeds that define who they are. Everyone, or everything rather, in one's world becomes symbolic in nature, open to appropriation according to one's individual taste, with nothing tethering the symbol to the truth behind its origin. This is Baudrillard's condition of simulacra. Instead of authenticity and ownership, people emphasize the fleeting appearance of things, the processes of selection as an accomplishment, and the pleasure of mediated consumption. Dept also discussed the concept of détournement, turning expressions of the capitalist system and its media culture against itself, and this is what has changed in the present moment. Détournement has become an everyday practice in the construction of people's various represented identities. It does nothing to interrupt the power relations of capitalism, as this process has been successfully commodified. It does reflect, however, an attitude of postmodernism, the spirit of inventing oneself, and it celebrates manipulation of simulacra as an achievement. It presents moments of truth to flash through irony. However, it doesn't keep that hole open. Rather, it allows As described previously, it allows for a sense of accomplishment through armchair activism or slacktivism, achieving a personal expression of moral and ethical value without having to act on it beyond appropriating images. So the danger is we have a lot of playful irony, but no new ideas allowed to be meaningfully considered. This leads to a solipsistic, self-referential, exclusive, and ultimately dysfunctional community. The solution to this, in reference to the title of this talk, is to control your own mind. Be open to concepts of truth beyond your immediate experiences and between your communities. Know that being ironic is an option for the privileged that often plays with other people's misfortune. Seek to understand and respect the original intended meanings behind the symbols that become memes. Challenge others with that information and seek challenges yourself. If we are all, in a sense, broadcasters online, should we learn and follow ethical standards for broadcasting? In the end, it's your mind that I'm suggesting that you control. Thank you. Goodbye.